I'd like to, for our second panel, I would like to welcome Alisa Lombard, principal lawyer from Lombard Law, and Nicole Rabbit, Survivor Circle for Reproductive Justice, who is accompanied by her daughter Shelby Kaylee Kateri-Puyak. Sorry if I didn't say your name properly. Welcome, and we will start with your opening remarks. And shall we start with you, Ms. Nicole Rabbit? Or you want to start first?
Yes.
No, Ms. Lombard, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us here today. And I want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Nation as uninvited guests. And we're very grateful to the committee today for hearing about this, for sitting and listening to the issues around this very important matter. It occurred to me that while Senator Boyer was speaking, that I could do very little to add to the very plentiful information that is already before you. And to the extent that I can be helpful and supportive of the survivors, I would simply refer to my testimony before the Senate in the study of April 2019. I think there's some information in there that could be helpful. And I also just want to say a few quick words about context and measure. And the rest of my time, I think it's only appropriate be taken by the very genuine, true expert in this matter, who are the survivors. And so, to the point of context, Senator Boyer laid it out very clearly. We are in a set of circumstances whereby this heinous human rights violation continues to occur. And there are many moving parts to that heinous human rights violation. There are many reasons, but in 2024, there are no more excuses. And in the context of that undeniable reality, I think it's important to understand measure. And by measure, I mean it's important to examine the depth, the far-reachingness, and the level of the harm that is caused by this practice and its operation with impunity, and to respond in kind as legislators. And so with that, there's really nothing I could add to this discussion apart from trying to be helpful in response to questions. And I think it highly appropriate that you hear from the real experts in this matter. Thank you.
Ms. Lombard, that's very generous of you, and I appreciate what you said. And senators, I'll ask the clerk to make available the transcripts from the Human Rights Committee. I'm putting you on, and if you're uncomfortable, we will leave it. But this committee is often not part of that committee, so they may not have heard what you said at Human Rights. I will make that available to the committee. But is there just a brief synopsis? Yes, please.
In terms of a brief synopsis, what we did do is that we shared some of the stories from the survivors to really illustrate the human component of this issue. And to be clear about it. Today, you have the honor, the great honor of the presence of a survivor, and so there's really no need, and there's very little propriety attached with my sharing that information when you're before the people who can share it. And so the discussion or the presentation at that time really had to do with how pressing this issue was, and how the issue was extremely stubborn as far as getting into its reparation. And the questions that were posed, the very thoughtful questions that were posed by the honorable senators this morning of Senator Boyer, all touch upon the wheels, the operationalization of countering this issue, which is highly stubborn. And so what I would say again in reference to context, and I did mention this in April of 2019, is that the survivors have been abundantly clear in what their objectives are. And those objectives, in the first and foremost, relate to prevention. If someone can be saved the fate of having to live with a lifetime of something they did not want, that so deeply affects them, then that is where some energy should be put. And that's where we see Bill S-250 as living in many ways, because it has that tremendous deterrent effect. And we can't forget, and I think that this has been already mentioned by the honorable senators, that there is such a gender component to this issue. Let's visualize for a moment, if we may, a birthing woman, their partner standing next to them. Could we conceive of a circumstance in which a physician or a health practitioner of any ilk within a health institution would approach that man and say it's time for a vasectomy immediately? No, we can't. But we can ask the woman whose legs are in stirrups. And so I'm sorry to use those very descript circumstances to implore this committee to consider the very serious nature of these violations. But these are simple facts. This is what happens. And so one of the first objectives, of course, was that prevention and that awareness. And a lot of work has been done around that. In large measure, thank you to Senator Boyer. And the second component, which is important in this committee's study of the proposed criminalization of forced sterilization, is accountability. And so how do we hold those responsible accountable? Some may view 14 years as a very long sentence. I would speculate, and perhaps it's a bit more than speculation, than any woman who lives with unwanted infertility might view that as a form of prison as well. And so let us be measured in examining what the proposed sanctions to these very terrible violations really are. The third objective was reparations. And that continues to be worked on. How do you repair the loss of the ability to make life? You know, there's no financial or pecuniary amount that can bring that into knowing or into understanding. I'm sure that nobody around this table, none of these honorable senators, none of you honorable senators or the people in the gallery could imagine or conceive of your life without the little ones that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Lombard. Mm-hmm. And Ms. Rabbit, welcome. We really appreciate you being here. We know it's not easy, and that's why we appreciate your daughter being here with you. And please take all the time you need to relate what you have to say, and know that if you want to come back, you can. And we really salute you for being here. It's not easy for you, and thank you for being here. Ms. Rabbit.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Nidaniku Bitaki. My Indian name is Eagle Woman. English name, Nicole Rabbit. I have my daughter here as my support person and my grandson. Kind of emotional, but I'm going to work through this. My mother recently passed away on January 21st, 2024, which was just last month, at the age of 78. I know she's here with me now. I can feel her. Just to begin, we were both sterilized, coursed into being sterilized around the age of 28 after having 4 kids. She had 4 kids, I had 4 kids. So here's a picture or a collage of my mother. And so basically this is just a quick glimpse of her life and 4 generations. So this was her as a toddler at residential school, where she basically was raised since birth, because her mother worked at the residential school as a cook. So the nuns and priests were basically her caregivers during that time. She made her way through residential school. There's a picture of her in her teens. Over here is a picture of her when she graduated from her master's degree. Here's a picture of her 4 kids, myself and my siblings. I'm the youngest, so when she was coerced into being sterilized, that was in 73. Here, the next picture is my mom, myself, and my daughter Kateri. So that would be 3 generations. And the last picture here is my mom with her great grandson. So this is my mom. This is just a quick glimpse. She's done so much in her lifetime that it would be, I can't speak on most of her things. But we're here today to speak on coerced and forced sterilization, which I didn't know that had happened to her until I spoke, and I was speaking with Alisa. So it was after that where we started having deep conversations, and we talked about, why it happened, our feelings, our hurts. And my mother, she is a very strong, gentle lady who, when she said something, she meant it. She didn't go rambling on and this and that, and she never spoke of herself. She always spoke and stood up for other people. So, yeah. Okay. It's kind of hard to sit here because I still haven't processed the passing of my mother. There were so many things that happened in this last month that she knew I was doing, and she was part of. So I'm not going to go where I am. So with the recent passing of my mother, Sate Biaki, charging the enemy woman, that's her Blackfoot name, I felt it was very important for me to be here and support Senator Yvonne Boyer and Alisa Lombard, lawyer, in regards to Bill S-250, an act to amend the criminal code sterilization procedures. Could you pass me some Kleenex, please? Yep. Thank you. Before my mother passed away, I was her caregiver. I was the one who was looking after her and then became her POA. So then she did everything up until the point where she appointed me as her power of attorney. So I got to spend a lot of time with my mom, which I always have, but the mother-daughter relationship kind of turned into the caretaker and patient, but at the same time, we always had that strong bond. So my mother was my go-to person, the one I would call, the one I would ask for advice. And it didn't matter what time She always took my call. She always had something to say that would make me stronger to keep moving on. Not only for me, but she was the rock of our family. So her passing is really going to take a toll on all of us. And I have to be that strong one now to start taking care of my nieces and my nephews, their kids, their grandchildren, my children, and my grandchildren, and the generations to come. It's very difficult to sit here in front of you all, and it's, traumatizing. It is. And to speak of the trauma and the hurt that happened to me, and I get emotional, and I don't want to go there. So I'm using my mother's strength, so I'll use my mother's strength and the courage that she instilled in me to speak to you today. And like I said before, I've held long discussions with my mom regarding coerced and forced sterilization. And I spoke with my sister last night, and I said, what would you think Mom would say? I know what my mom would say. And she added, I said, okay. I said, so we'll go like that. I said, all right. So this is something that my mom would have said if she was sitting here where I'm sitting today. First thing is, and then she's, like I said, she's to the point. She would have said, someone has to be accountable for the act of genocide that we Indigenous people have faced and continue to face in regards to forced and coerced sterilization. We Indigenous people have always been poorly treated, and we would like it to stop systemic racism. Therefore, the recommended amendment must be stipulated in the criminal code. Our human rights continue to be violated to this day. And that's something that she would just say kindly with an open heart. So now, just ending where I'm going, is I actually want an apology for what happened to me. I want the Indigenous women, they need an apology. My mom didn't get an apology. And you took generations from us. I could have had more kids. My daughter could have had more siblings. I could have had more siblings. Our family would have been bigger. It's just like you wiped out a generation. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robert, for your very, very touching testimony. It has touched us all. And I know that I'm speaking for the whole committee in saying, for whatever part we could play in this, and we take responsibility too, and want to apologize to you. And I know that's not the apology you may be looking for, but as chair of this committee, I'm on behalf of this committee, we apologize to you. And once again, I'm saying to you, and your daughter who has to listen to this very hard thing that her mother's going through and her history too. We thank you for being here because you are teaching us. Thank you. I'll start with Senator Barras.
Thank you to all of you for being here. I can only imagine how difficult this is, and one of the first things I wanted to say to you, Ms. Rabbit, is I'm so sorry for the loss of your mom. And I just wanted to ask you, I think you said her name in Blackfoot, but what was your mom's name so we can honor her with knowing that?
Her English name or her Blackfoot
Both.
name?
Both, please.
Sate Biaki. And the translation of her Indian name, her Blackfoot name, is charging the enemy woman. It was kind of...
It's a great name. Thank you.
She really stood, you know, her name really represented her, but in a gentle way. It wasn't she was going after, it was, she had, you know, she was so gentle.
Thank you. Ms. Rabbit, yeah.
Her English name?
Yes.
Mary Doreen Rabbit.
Thank you. Well, we honor her today, and you honor her, and her granddaughter does by your presence today. According to Senator David Wells, when he gave his speech about this bill in the Senate, he told us that despite existing laws, more than 12,000 women have undergone forced sterilization without any charges being brought against those responsible. That was the estimate that he provided, and I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on the reasons you think why, despite the fact there are some provisions in the criminal code that could have been used for those types of offenses, why do you think that there seems to have been a total absence of charges or convictions in those kind of cases?
Like I said, we've always been treated very poorly, and it was almost like to wipe out the Indians, right? Wipe out the Indian. So, you know, going back to the residential school, you're taking the child away from the parents. And they didn't know what happened after that. Well, you take a child away from the parents, the loving mother and father. What are their roles now? What can they do when all they want is their child? Like, there's no way that I would ever allow that. I would fight. And back then, it was allowed, you know, with nothing. You know, they had no say, or the parents would go to jail, you know. My mom always spoke about what happened and how we were treated, but she always had a solution. She always worked hard. She built programs. And I was really hoping that, you know, she would see the day that, you know, justice would be served. But she's
Her own way.
in spirit. I know. I know she's here. I feel her.
I wanted to just ask Ms. Lombard a question. The Native Women's Association of Canada recommends clearly stating that Bill S-250 will not prevent Indigenous women who have already been subjected to forced sterilization from pursuing criminal charges against offenders under other existing sections of the criminal code, such as aggravated assault under Section 268. Do you think that that clarification is necessary to be able to protect the rights of victims of forced sterilizations that occurred before this bill may be adopted?
Thank you for that question, Senator Bowders. I think that there are, does it need to be amended? Well, not necessarily. I think we also have to consider the nature of the offense, which is sexual in nature. Limitations don't really come up, though they're not retroactive. And so what would be the benefit if the assault is sexual in nature, which, I mean, biologically speaking, it incontrovertibly is, there are no limitations. And so though there is no specific provision dealing with it historically, those provisions can still be used. I don't see a technical reason to include, you know, a for further certainty provision within the existing bill, but I don't suppose it would hurt. For example, if someone who had committed or was accused of having committed the offense in S-250 prior to its coming into force, hopefully, you know, that shall not preclude, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, I think that operates on its own. I don't think that it's necessary to have a for further certainty clause, but if further certainty is needed, then, you know, there are options there.
Maybe go to Senator Dalfo and then Senator Klein.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and especially thank you very much to Mrs. Rabbit. Sorry, I forgot your Blackfoot name. It's Eagles Woman. Sorry, Eagles Woman, for being with us today with your daughter and speaking on behalf of the grandmother. So we have a full line of mothers to mothers and to a pregnant woman who is going to be soon a mother. And I appreciate that. Thank you. And of course, I appreciate the attendance of Mrs. Lombard, who has been very involved in one of the first class actions to be launched, I think, and it has had ripple effects ever since. Many provinces are having similar class actions being pending, so that may bring some, maybe not apology, but some compensations in terms of financial compensations, and hopefully I think it will bring more than compensations, but ways to prevent repetition in the future, which is really the goal that we're all trying to achieve through the class actions and through this bill, because what has happened should not have happened and should not happen again. This is the critical part, and I certainly appreciate that. And do you think, I don't know if you can answer that, I don't know if you, Eagles Woman, you can answer that. Do you see a change around you? Do you see a change when you go to a health facility, when you are in contact with doctors, nurses, people that are providing healthcare services? Or do you think it's still the same old cultures and racism, systemic racism?
Back home, yes, it's still the same. We have a lot of our people who are given prescription medication, and which they're, you know, of course they're abusing, but are the doctors, you know, looking for ways to say, no, you don't need this medication, or, you know, let's try something else. Maybe it's trauma, or maybe they need counseling, you know, but again, it's almost like they're trying to wipe us out, because back home we're dealing with ODs daily. Like, that's no lie. Sometimes there's 5 funerals in a week, and even planning my mom's funeral, I had to wait or plan ahead because there were so many funerals. So, no, it's still the same. But they're using the pill now, like prescription drugs. So there's a lot of our people who are dying of ODs, you know, and who are addicted to prescription drugs, which are affecting, you know, the family dynamics and everything. So, you know, it's still the same, I feel. And I don't know, like with my daughter, and I'm always there for her. And she calls me. If I can't be with her in the clinic or with her doctor, she'll call me. And I'm always telling, make sure and ask, make sure and ask, make sure and ask. And she does. So that's just me going, you know, to ensure that she's being taken care of and nobody is influencing her or any way. So I hope that answered your question, or if you want to go further, Alisa.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Klein?
Thank you, Chair. And I do want to echo my colleagues that went before me in their sentiments and their words. I share that. I do want to ask a question or two of Alisa Lombard, and then maybe come back with time here to you. The Bill S-250 excludes Section 45 of the Criminal Code as a defense for the new sterilization offense. Can you elaborate on the significance of this exclusion?
To the best of my recollection, and I'm working from memory here, if we were in court, I might say, may I have a moment? But to the best of my recollection, and I hope someone will correct me if I'm wrong, Section 45, or Article 45 of the Criminal Code talks about certain immunities associated with those who are performing particular duties, such as surgeons, physicians, police officers. Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. My memory was good. And so the purpose of that is really to, as I understand it, to give some traction to the fiduciary relationship between physician and patient in these kinds of precarious circumstances. So, I mean, sterilization can only be carried out surgically, really. There's no other way for that to occur other than, chemical or these other types of situations. What we have heard are circumstances of surgeries, right? And so typically, and this goes to what was raised by Senator Batters and others earlier, the assault provisions are typically used because of the existence of Article 45, right? So what we have constantly heard is it's a civil matter. It's a civil matter. And though it certainly is, it's also a very heinous human rights violation. And so if that is the case, where is the remedy? Where is the measured response to robbing a woman of her fertility? Where is it? So the purpose of including Section 45 was really to say, we will not consider that in this circumstance because there's a very disproportionate number of women, Indigenous women and other racialized women, who are experiencing unwanted sterilization. And so we cannot use Section 45 to come in and grant additional immunity to already powerful folks in a tremendous power imbalance and circumstances that are also very vulnerable, like childbirth. So that was really the purpose of that inclusion.
Another question on the legal side of this is, can you explain how and if Bill S-250 addresses the current legal and ethical gaps in prosecuting cases of non-consensual sterilization?
Oof. I hesitate to use a very common analogy, which is, we're talking about a hot dog. There's a lot of meat in that hot dog as far as prosecution, et cetera, is concerned. So understanding what that process looks like is critical. They say, I cannot quote the person who said this. I can't remember who it was, but they say laws without enforcement are just words. Enforcement without laws is just violence. And so if we think about what happens when words are put into a document like the Criminal Code, which in 74 was about this thick, and now it's quite a bit thicker, there are a whole host of things that need to happen. Investigations need to occur. Enforcement agencies, such as the police, have to take these things seriously, perhaps even take notice of them. They have to then investigate dutifully and professionally, as they are legally required to do. They then have to swear in information. The information has to be picked up by the Crown. The Crown has to consider the likelihood of conviction beyond a reasonable doubt, and then they get to exercise that rather obscure prosecutorial discretion. So I think that, the space, or what lives between the inclusion of words in a book as law and their enforcement or their efficiency, is tremendous. And I think that systemic racism and sexism lives in every component from the words to the execution. And so do I think it'll be effective in eradicating all forms? No. Will it be effective in contributing to the eradication of all forms? Absolutely. Systemic racism and sexism require systemic responses, right? And so if you're trying to get at a nuanced issue that has a variety of layers, then you need to provide a layered response. And S-250 is one such layer. It's one of the ingredients that are critical to preventing the practice.
Thank you, Senator Pate, and then Senator Busson. Senator Pate.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for being here. And I join in both apologizing on behalf of all Canadians, and it's not sufficient, and you deserve the apology that you are seeking from the government, from decision makers, from the doctors who performed horrendous attack on your bodily integrity and your mom's, and condolences on the loss of your mom. It's a huge loss to lose your mom and children. And so I'd like to hear more about, because for years of working with people who have been victimized, it's what you said resonated when you said you want to prevent this from happening to someone else, and you want reparation. You want to know it's not going to happen again, and as best as possible. What are some of the other things that need to happen in addition to this bill that would help move this along? Not just for you, but also for other people. And as you and I spoke very briefly as we walked, the reality is this is still happening. The racism and the sexism within the medical system, within society, particularly for Indigenous women, is still a major problem. So I'm not asking you to solve the issues, but are there some other things that you could see we could do right now that would be helpful?
There's a lot of things that can be done, but I think amending the bill, like the S-250, and to include the sterilization procedures in that would deter the medical professional people that the Indigenous people are entrusting. Like they're wanting to hear from the doctor, like they're concerned about themselves, but at the same time there's that, whoa, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm afraid. And I did fail to mention that my niece was forced into being sterilized because one of her children got apprehended. So the system stepped in and they forced her to be sterilized. And I didn't know this until last year when I was talking to my mom about what's going on, the updates and whatnot. And then she just said, "Auntie, I was sterilized." And what? I said, what happened? And she just went on and she talked for an hour or two because she felt safe because we were already talking about it. And it just made sense to her to share. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of our people. And they're not saying anything unless, they feel safe. So there has to be a safe place for our people to talk, because there's a lot of people who are silent. Like my mom, she didn't say anything until I did. And so going back to your question, this is the step that we need to take to ensure that there are going to be criminal charges with these medical professional people and even the child and family who have authority over individuals or children, but they don't have authority what happens with our body. So for them to be criminally charged would deter this from going on and happening again. And it's still happening today. It's probably happening, like, as we speak. We don't know. And basically, it's towards Indigenous people, towards Indigenous women. And that's going to affect the future of our people. Like, generations. Like, my mother talked to me about our history and where I come from and who our ancestors are. So I come from a long line of leaders. Maginima, he was a well-known leader who led our people. That's my great-great-grandfather. And I know you're that leader in some way or capacity or whatever. I feel that. I feel his strength. I feel my mother's strength and her mother. And so my mother took on her mother's name, Sate Biaki. So that was actually my grandmother's Blackfoot name, then my mother's name. And before she passed, which was about four months ago, she gifted me her name. But I haven't used it yet. I have to speak with elders on how the transfer goes. So it's known. I'm not just taking. It has to be. Because my mom gifted me with her name, not knowing that, a few months down the road, she was going to be gone. So that's where I have to start speaking up. And I'm speaking up for our Indigenous women. I'm speaking up for my children, for my generations to come, my grandchildren.
Thank you so much. Sorry to cut you off. I don't mean to be rude, but we've got still more. Senator Busson and then Senator Clement. Senator Busson.
And again, I echo my colleagues' sentiments. It's not often that in a room like this, in these kinds of situations, that we can offer condolences and congratulations in the same voice. And you have brought 4 generations here to the table. It really strikes me that you brought your mother's voice, your daughter's voice, and your unborn grandchild's voice. So I thank you for the bravery and courage to do that. It resonates in this room, I can assure you. And I really, my question is actually for Ms. Lombard, although it's brought up by some of the things that were said when you gave your heartfelt conversation to us and your feelings. For Ms. Lombard, and I should have probably asked our honourable senator here when she was speaking, I believe a lot of the value of this legislation will be in deterrent value to the actions of medical service people in the future when they're dealing with these situations, and I really do believe that's an important part. But to be a deterrent, there has to be, I believe, an awareness. So when this bill hopefully is passed and with whatever amendments, I'm wondering if anybody has given any consideration to, as was done with the Me Too movement, when the heinous crimes of historical nature were brought forward, if there's ever been any consideration, because of the fact that there's no statute of limitations on aggravated sexual assault, assault causing bodily harm, a number of other crimes that I can think of. Is there ever been any consideration to taking some of these strong historical cases, the one that Senator Boye talks about, where the person just said, let's take the other fallopian tube, to prosecuting those cases and bringing them to court as an extra, whether, I believe some would be successful given the eyewitness testimony that might be available. Has there ever been anybody talk about taking some of these historical cases to court? Do you know?
I I believe Senator Boye said she would answer that question.
I just
when
wanted
he-
to raise it. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I just wanted to raise it as something that may be part of the deterrent value of moving forward with this.
Absolutely. Section 45, however, or Article 45 of the Criminal Code does operate to undermine those types of initiatives, right? And so where a physician can be excused in terms of the surgery that they visit upon a woman unwillingly because they are doing that. And if we look at the verbiage or the language of Article 45 of the Criminal Code, it talks about for the benefit of that person. And what that really has given rise to, if we think about and infuse the stories of the survivors as we have heard them and understand them to exist and believe them to exist in that way, what we have seen is a lot of judgment. And it is for her benefit, is heard a lot. But this, really sits in stark contrast to decisions like Millett versus Schulman. It talks about inalienable bodily autonomy. And so the question doesn't become in the judgment of the surgeon, is it what is best for her? The ground under that proposition must shift to the inalienable bodily autonomy protected under Section 7. And so 45 is a bit of a problem. And so that's why Bill S-250 kind of puts that aside and says we are dealing with a very specific, stubborn, historical, and contemporary problem that requires immediate systemic response to prevent the harm and the suffering.
Thank you so much. Senator Clement.
Thank you to all three of you for being here. I fully endorse the words of our chair, Senator Jaffer, in terms of the apology and in terms of her gratitude for your testimony. Just want to comment, and then I'll end with a question for you, Nicole. Your comments as a lawyer speaking of the justice system, your comments around your description, the use of your descriptive language, it's really powerful. It's the way that we need to speak to Canadians. So please keep doing that. And the way that you describe Indigenous storytelling, like it needs to continue to infuse our entire justice system if we're to get anything right in this country. So thank you. Ms. Rabbit, I'm sorry. Shelby, I'm sorry for your loss. You speak of your mother and you say that she would speak to us with a gentle tone, with an open heart, but she would be forgiven for having rage in her heart, in yours. How do you manage that? The vulnerable populations are always the ones who are expected to be resilient. If I have to hear the word resilience one more time, I'm going to scream. How do you manage that? Or do you have those feelings? Did your mother have those feelings?
Well, I'll go back to this one incident. It happened at work. I was yelled at, and of course I didn't say names, but I did go to my mom and I explained to her, this is what happened. And she knew it wasn't right. And so she said, well, it's either you have to go and confront this person or, go to HR, because you have rights. And she said, and if she ever yells at you again, you go to her and you tell her, don't yell at me. I am a grandmother. And I said, okay, I will. So I was waiting for that. It didn't happen. So that's where I grabbed my strength. And I said, okay, if I have to face this, I got this, because I really take what my mother, tells me and shares with me to heart. Yeah.
We will too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah, well-
almost like kindness, just do your job, do your best, if somebody doesn't like it, in your heart you're doing what's right.
Thank you.
Just so you know, the bills are for us to go to the Senate. So that's why the bills are not an urgent thing. Well, it's urgent, but not that urgent. I want to thank you, Ms. Lombard, for being here. Ms. Lombard, for being here, and thank you for your leadership. And I want to thank you also, Shelby Cayley, for being here with your mom. You also had to show a lot of courage, so thank you. And thank you for showing us how important it is to support people, and thank you. And for you, Miss Eagle Woman, I want to say to you, what you've said is always going to stay with us. And we will, when we consider this bill, we will be always thinking of what you said. And we thank you, we respect you, we admire you, and please know that your words are not lost on this committee. And once again, thank you to all three of you for being here. Thank you.